Hello all and welcome, esteemed friends and guests, to the program launch for National Young Writers Festival 2020. My name is Mike.
I'm Raelee.
And I'm Isabel.
And we are the co-directors of this year's festival, coming to you live from Sydney, Brisbane and Adelaide.
National Young Writers Festival usually takes place on the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi peoples in New South Wales. But in 2020, as we go digital, we now have writers tuning into our events from bedrooms, living rooms, and libraries spread across the land, a land comprised of over 500 unceded nations. We acknowledge and pay respects to the Awabakal and Worimi peoples on whose land our festival was born, and many, many other First Nations peoples as the traditional custodians of the unceded lands on which the festival occurs this year. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We acknowledge the resilience of their continuing cultures. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
As many of you know, the National Young Writers Festival is a little bit different in 2020. Our core festival team first had the chance to meet in March this year. The idea was that Isabel, Mike, and I would meet the festival co-managers Jesse and Saoirse in Melbourne. Unfortunately, due to border restrictions and flight cancellations, Saoirse was unable to get at Perth. And so we communicated with Saoirse remotely, which as it happens, was a telling sign of things to come.
Although you could feel the mounting dread on the streets of Melbourne, we didn't yet know that we'd congregated on what would essentially be the last weekend before the first lockdown of Australia's capital cities. I remember sitting on a tram in Melbourne with my head folded into my legs like a lawn chair because I was worried I'd breathe in COVID. And then I had several successive flights cancelled before managing to cross the border into New South Wales. And the following day, the major theatre company that I worked for ceased production for what we didn't realise would become a 6-month shutdown.
The day before the meeting, I finished production on a major performance work during the Adelaide Festival season. And when I returned to Adelaide 2 days later, the airport was practically empty and I didn't go back into my office for 5 months.
Up in Brisbane, things seemed calmer. Scary, but calmer. I had just begun full-time work at an academic library a few months prior, and it would take a few more weeks before I started working from home. Still, the thought of going to Melbourne for the weekend was daunting. And after returning to our home cities, it quickly became clear that the festival we know and love of in Newcastle could not occur this year. And so we made the necessary decision to migrate the whole shebang online.
In spite of the dread, that initial meeting in Melbourne was a success. We came loaded with plans and ideas, and we found that we shared more or less a common vision. When discussion turned to the theme, we decided that we ought to pay heed to the new decade into which we were stepping, and thus we landed on the Raucous Twenties.
The 1920s are an almost mythic time for writing and artistic endeavour. It was the era of breakneck social change, of civil unrest and instability, of Josephine Baker, Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald, Salvador Dali, Frida Kahlo, of David Unaipon, the first Indigenous writer to have a novel published in Australia, of the explosion of jazz in the United States, one of the first great waves of sexual liberation, an economic boom that slowly crept towards a crash, the creeping resurgence of fascism around the world, and of course, a global pandemic.
Those 20s were roaring, but the festival is not about those 20s. It's about the new 20s, terrifying, galvanizing, energizing, and raucous. These are the lessons to be. There are lessons to be learned and from the past, and so we look to it with a critical eye. There is a spirit to be harnessed in the wild growth and innovation of the jazz age, but valorizing the literary tradition of the 1920s ignores the significant injustices it upheld and the communities it left behind.
So this year, we've curated a program that reflects on the past, but looks to an uncertain future. It is a pragmatic, optimistic, passionate collection of events, we hope. Before I'm to celebrate our community in all its complexity and to share our skills with one another. After all, it's been a shit year, and we could all use a bit of hope amongst all that righteous anger. And so without any further ado, we would like to present to you the 2020 program.
Upskilling might be the unemployment watchword of the year. When we decided to have a really strong practical focus in the program, we didn't realise how relevant it would become. We wanted to present writers with the opportunity to learn and sharpen their skills, and we've included this in the program in a number of ways. Firstly, thanks to ABC's Haywire, we have a professional development series with events on budgeting, how to get a book deal, and how to run a magazine.
Secondly, we've put together panels, round table discussions and workshops with industry-specific focuses, including screen in writing, critiquing, podcasting, and sketch comedy.
And thirdly, we're looking to the future with this year's Younger Young Writers Festival. We want younger young writers to get a strong base to work from, and we're talking poetry, short stories, and dialogue. But remember, younger young writers, you're welcome across the festival. It's never too early to start to think about the ethical implications of fact-checking.
Speaking of fact-checking, we began this process with the intent to learn from the past and move into the next decade, critically aware and focused. And so we programmed with our lives in mind. Complicated, political, diverse, and defiant. We talk a lot about communities, writing for communities, and also the communities that our writers are a part of. There will be conversations about Indigenous data sovereignty, trans histories, and migrant activism. We're facing our fears and our futures and talking about climate change writing, dystopian realities, and whether or not we can kill our landlords.
And finally, we're also here to have fun. The late night readings are back, as is the festival game. We're debating which streaming service has the best SB grade content, playing Fuck, Marry, Kill with writers from the 1920s and getting cozy in the kitchen together.
We've been lucky enough to partner with some amazing organisations. We've got workshops from VoiceWorks, The Joy of Featherston and Sweaty City, a collaboration with podcast Gay Bee Club, Carclu and Country Arts SA are presenting one of our panels and a whole host of excellent readings. We're hosting the New South Wales final of the Australian Slam Poetry Competition with Newcastle Library and working with Express Media to host the Hachette Australia Prize for Young Writers.
Even though this is a comparatively small program, we still have 50 events and over 70 artists. Most of the festival will be totally live with a chat function so we can still hang out, but you can also watch after the fact. Most of the events will also be captioned within 24 hours of going online. We've got panels, workshops, performances, competitions and games, and a durational stream of consciousness Google Doc. We're not in Newcastle this year, but we reckon this digital business is going to be pretty great. But maybe you want to see some evidence. So we've got you some evidence. We've got a fantastic collection of writers with us here tonight to give a special performance for all of you that's a little taste of the festival to come. Now, the first of those artists in our amazing collection is Jules Orcullo. Jules is a playwright and theatre maker based in Sydney, Australia, and one of the founding members of the Joy Offensive, an international performance collective with bases in Sydney and London. To kick us off, Jules will be performing a short writing and connecting ritual that they often use in the Joy Offensive Holding Space workshops, one of which will be held this year as part of National Young Writers Festival. Take it away, Jules.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you so much to the festival for inviting me here today. I'd like to first acknowledge the elders of the lands on which I'm speaking, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and acknowledge that these lands were never ceded. I'd like to also pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging of this land and any unceded lands you may be tuning in from today. As Mike mentioned, my name's Jules. I run a performance platform from called the Joy Offensive, and we connect artists across different diasporas across the globe. And something that we've been thinking about in the last few weeks is ancestors, shared ancestors, ancestral bonds, but also anybody who has shaped the soil that we spring from, the air that we breathe, and the fact that all of us will be ancestors at one point, even if we never have parents, even if we never parent, or even if we never have any progeny, we will all leave this earth in a different shape to when it was when we arrived. So in the next few minutes, I'd love for us to do a little bit of writing. And what you'll need for this is a device, the one that you're watching on now, and possibly, if one's available to you, another device. So if you're streaming on a computer, grab a phone or a tablet or vice versa. If not, no worries, I'll talk you through. And I'd also like you to find 3 things within your vicinity at the moment. One thing that is growing or living, maybe a plant or some seeds. One thing that was once alive and vital but is now dead or dying. So maybe some rotting fruit, if you've got some, tea leaves, maybe wine. And then another thing that you would consider immortal. So maybe some salt or any jewelry that you're wearing with you today. Don't think too hard about this. If you can, bring these things together close to you. So again, that's one thing that's alive, one thing that may no longer be alive, and one thing that's immortal. And I'll just pause here to give you some time to find those things. Again, nothing to think about too hard, just whatever is near you. Now, okay, each of these things, you might still be finding them, but I'll just keep plowing on and hopefully it will be helpful. Each of these things has come into your space at different times in your life, but they're here with you now for one reason or another. So how have these objects come into your life? How have they nourished you? And how might they speak to each other now that they're in each other's company? First, I'd like you to focus on the thing that is immortal, some salt, maybe some jewelry, something near you that might survive you once you leave this earth. I'd like you to write one sentence that you would like to survive you. One sentence you would like to impart that object before you pass. For those of you who are watching this on Facebook, I'd like you, if possible, to type this sentence into a comment underneath the live stream. One sentence that you would wish, one sentence that you'd like to share with the things that will survive you. And when you're ready, you can hit send. It's totally okay if you don't feel like sharing as well. Alrighty, let's plow on. Thanks very much. Now I'd like you to focus on the thing that is dying or is no longer alive. This is something that has journeyed through much of its life cycle already. Maybe if you're a young writer, maybe more than you. I'd like you to ponder on what this object has brought you and what wisdom it could impart to you. And with this in mind, I'd like you to write 4 words, just 4 words of comfort or 4 words of thanks that you'd like to express to that object before it returns to nature. Now, if you have another device, I'd like you to bring up an alarm or a calendar app. If you've got a phone with you, perhaps an alarm. I'd like you to write these 4 words into the label of the alarm or the event description in your calendar app. Just 4 words of comfort or 4 words of thanks. If you're working on just one device, you can type this into a Facebook comment or just on a piece of paper. Up to you. And whenever you're ready, you can set that alarm for yourself in 7 days' time. If you're on Facebook and you feel comfortable, please feel free to hit send. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Amanda, Liv. Thank you so much for sharing your words with us. Now I'd like you to focus on the thing that is growing or is alive. This might be something that still has a way to go in its life cycle and perhaps has come into your care. I'd like you to think about when it first came to be and how long it might be before it leaves. And now I'd like you to write 1 sentence of encouragement, one thing that you would like to impart before it leaves your care. If you are using a second device, like a phone, I'd like you to bring up a messaging service, the one that you use most. It might be text messages, WhatsApp, Messenger, Telegram. I'd like you to write that sentence of encouragement to speak to your object as it journeys through its life into a message. Just a sentence. If you are not using a second device, you can also use a Facebook comment. 1 sentence of encouragement. And now, if you have that sentence, I'd like you to find somebody in your contacts who might like to hear from you. It could be a family member or a friend or a colleague, somebody that you speak to regularly or somebody that you maybe haven't spoken to in a while, but somebody that you trust. If you're working on one device, you can write this in a Facebook comment or in a piece of paper. And when you're ready, you can press send. Once you're done, come back to your original seat. Take 1 deep breath and give yourself love, give yourself props for the great ancestor you're going to become. Thanks everybody for sharing your time and your words. Thank you for holding space for me today. Later in the festival, we, as the Joy Offensive, will be holding an online writers' ritual with London-based writer and organiser Joanna Nastari. This will be primarily First Nations, migrant and diaspora folks all around the globe. So it would be really lovely to see some of you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jules, for that beautiful, beautiful performance. A real taste of what's to come and an absolute testament to you. Thank you for holding space for all of us tonight. Next up in our fantastic roster of artists is Christy Tan. Christy is a poet and activist based in Naarm or Melbourne. Her work has been published in Cordite Poetry Review, The Suburban Review, and Antithesis Journal, and we're delighted to share a poem she has recorded specifically for the occasion.
I want to begin by acknowledging that my writing was produced on the stolen land of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. On this land, Black sovereignty was never ceded, but it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I want to acknowledge that Australia only exists in the colonial imagination as an ongoing project held up by systems that serve to perpetuate invasion and genocide. I want to acknowledge my own subject position as a first-generation migrant settler, as a starting point to think about how we can be in solidarity with all dispossessed and displaced peoples towards co-liberation. I suspect all material struggle is inherently a struggle of the imagination. I do not say this to reduce material struggle to the theoretical, nor to naively assert that material problems can be overcome by the mind. I say this because mere survival is not enough. After the First World War, the Raucous Twenties ushered in multiple political and artistic movements. Cubism and Surrealism revolutionized the mind, and the Harlem Renaissance revolutionized the people. 1 century later, we are living through our own Raucous Twenties, and art is still an ongoing revolutionary practice. Picasso believed that every act of creation is an act of destruction, but instead of taking apart paintings, the artist today is tasked with taking apart society and its oppressive institutions. In this way, writing is less a way of knowing and more a way of unknowing, a form of unlearning and destabilizing the dominant modes of patriarchal and colonial thought we have internalized. We write to identify the language we need to destroy to create new languages of agency and care. We write to resist the language of fear that has been inscribed in us. We write to interrogate every structure and relation in society with the same intimate rigor we inspect the movement of a vowel or the violence in a name. The rupturing of language is the birth of poetry. Where the language of scarcity fails us, we imagine and enact abundant anti-colonial futures through poetry. Poetry exists as ideas to be thought and felt into existence, and we transform these thoughts and feelings into acts of love. The personal is political, is poetic, is praxis. Poetry cannot remain static in the imagination. It inevitably transcends the page as an embodied social practice in sustained relation and materialization. As an extension of body and land, poetry is to see outside the confines of definition and classification. Poetry is what is needed for a world beyond what currently fails us. When I imagine a world beyond racial capitalism and global imperialism, I am writing a love poem. When I say I love you, I am saying I want to love with you in a world without policing and violence in our homes, without borders and prisons separating us. Where I love you does not mean I own you. Where I love you does not belong to any hierarchy or binary. Where I love you means you are seen and I see with you.
During this pandemic, RISE needs your help in supporting asylum seekers, refugees, and ex-detainees. The COVID-19 pandemic has seen RISE provide essential food supplies and toiletries to its 3,000 members, but many are still on the waiting list. Visit the website now to donate so that we can reach all those who need our help.
Thank you for that powerful and galvanizing piece of writing, Christy. And that was also an initiative of Christy's to include the call out to RISE, a platform that we all believe, and particularly Christy, needs to have a voice at this moment. It's been a very difficult year for a lot of people, and it's a testament to how much Christy, that's the sort of writing that Christy presents, can galvanize and cause social change. The next artist in our roster is Goklin Finch, a fabulous writer who lives on the unceded lands of the Whadjuk and Noongar people. They were the former editor of ... and have been published in Westerly, Jed Press, VoiceWorks, Cottonmouth, and Australian Poetry, and we're stoked to present a piece that they've written specifically for this evening.
Kaya. My name is Gok-Lim. I'm a Hokkien Cantonese settler based in Whadjuk Butcher. Before I begin, I'd like to pay respects to the traditional owners of the land, Whadjuk people of the Bibbulmun Nation. I extend those respects to elders past and present, and hope for a future where we're all afforded freedom, justice, sovereignty. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. This is a song from my childhood. Teresa Tang. I usually think of a roar as a tangible vibration of sound. It connects as it shocks. You vibrate at a great enough speed. I believe you can pass around both sides of a tree at the same instant. It's like a quantum hug. If I look closely at the events of the past, they vibrate too quickly for me to see. The 1920s were the warlord period in China. Fighting in Guangxi led to my family leaving China, resettling in Penang. In Penang, my 13-year-old Gong Gong accepted a job as an indentured labourer on Christmas Island. My Gong Gong, much as I love him, I've never met him. And much as I love him, I only hear about stories of violence that he visited upon his family. Raucous Twenties makes me think of Turbulent Stream, now translated as The Family, a novel by Bajin. Bajin had abandoned his home city at the age of 19. In Turbulent Stream, the decaying Chinese family became the primary cause of China's problems. The old generation was clinging to its privileges and bending all to its will, crushing the spirit of the young people who were in touch with the great ideas circulating around the world. Western democracy, the liberated individual. The May 4th youth movement, Baihua, Nanyu, Guangdong. I can't pronounce the names and it sometimes makes me feel like they and I exist in alternate dimensions. So the suppression in Tiananmen in the 1920s happened again. So the Opium War happened again. In 1923, January, people of Perth, people of Boorloo, in the middle of another hot summer without any water. In the 1920s, White City, a carnival sideshow located at the bottom of William Street, was established in CBD along the banks of the Derbyl Yarragon, the Swan River. It became a site for the gathering of the Ugly Men's Association and their Ugly Land carnivals. These were places to escape surveillance from the 1905 Act, and so Aboriginal people used this to make some easy money working to catch up and maintain Aboriginal social organisation and kinship links. The Ugly Men's Association was disbanded and became Lottery West, now a major sponsor of the Perth Fringe World Festival. In semi-colonial China, as foreign powers ceaselessly competed with one another for colonial hegemony, new racialized groups were being created in everyday interactions. As Fanon says, race is not a superadded element discovered by chance in the course of investigation of cultural data. It's a mode of thinking, a mechanism of recognition that constantly constructs and renews the meaning of skin color. I don't know what decolonial China is. I don't know where my people are. Hong Kong, Hong Kong, Fragrant Harbour. In one of the stories that my family tells, my papa leaves Hong Kong to stay with family in Singapore and leaves my teenage mother alone with him in his violence. And then he dies in a hospital bed of TB under her care when she was 16. In another, he flees to Singapore and abandons his family and dies in an opium den. They never say these stories. My mother talks about swimming at waterfalls on the island, catching crabs and raising chickens. My mother never talks about being kicked off buses in Burloo in the 1960s. I never talk about how I learned what race was to me when I came here almost 20 years ago as a child and understood. I always talk about this wavering, this vibration, louder and louder, how it feels like I've been traveling the world for millennia in my body. And this loss of home haunts me the more I know about myself. I wanted to travel the world in my 20s, and now I understand where that comes from. Now I just want to find out the best place that I'll be. I believe in ghosts now. This moon that we have is the same moon where I leave out food for lost hungry ghosts, where I burn money to send to my ancestors, wherever they may be, where I light candles for them all to find me, that I may be a home for them. This is a practice, this is a Chinese practice, but it's a practice that is popular in Christmas Island, where there are many unmarked graves. I never talk about what I feel or see, but the way in which I talk about myself is always a dream. I never talk about my white father, or what his whiteness is, which is the type of silence of his self that is crystallized into jagged ice. I never write anymore, I just sit and wait. My heart shifts and shifts and shifts. Myself dissolves and crystallizes again and again. Gok-Lim, corner of the forest, child of Rakan, gold daughter.
Thank you, Gok-Lim, for that powerful interrogation of the mythology that obscures and disperses the rich realities of many of our ancestors from the 1920s and beyond. Next in our run is poet, DJ, and radio producer Holly Friedlander Liddicoat. Holly has been published in Cordite, Overland, Rabbit, Subtly, The Lifted Brow, and Voiceworks. She's currently producing Wax Lyrical, FDR's experimental writing and poetry podcast, and we're thrilled to have her broadcasting live from Sydney with a new poem.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me all. I just want to thank everyone that's already performed tonight. It's been really moving and I feel really inspired. And I also want to thank the Gadigal people whose land I'm broadcasting from today. Pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and of course to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here tonight. I've got two short poems I'd like to read tonight, both of which were written in the past 4 months. So I think looking at the Roaring 20s from the 2020 version, probably the two only things I've written this year, and by no means are they finished, which I think is very indicative of the times. So first, I'm going to start with a poem called In on Swamp, and this poem was written for a site-specific event run by Osmosis. It was heard by listeners on their daily walk in Centennial Park, and this particularly you could hear in Lachlan Swamp on Gadigal land in July. Rather buoyant to throw around a word like paradise, but I'd take bats over beeps and bastards any day, and greens, flaky tans and periwinkle eeks. Somewhere in another dimension, a silver Commodore zips past a window and a Nutalex-head passenger with red glasses throws the head back and laughs. Oh, to be zooming through a Saturday morning with such verve, or any morning really, or with any verve. My lungs are so full of muck and I cough and I cough, and I did this to myself almost with purpose and with good reason. This place, one time, was still. A colonial birth canal, water rush, quote unquote purity, semi-divine anxieties. Oh, drown thyself in wash tubs filled with paper bark or fecal matter, and what matters may matter, will mattress. Is opaqueness hidden meaning or an attempt to not be found out so quick? Focus shatters. Whatever peace you found here, is it here? Was it ever? Will it be enough to void thyself who, like pollen in the wind, will tumble dry on high speed up and down wind shafts, losing what amounts to a finger or a toenail before eventually settling somewhere else? And just my second poem is called Pan Break Ick. Dying happens faster on rainy days, except for the driver on that last slide towards the bank, even lip and longer than life's slide towards the bank. My hands not warm since March, as if the little men on the great pump's pulley took a break and never came back. Middle finger twitches in response. I grab your paw to prove a point, yours colder, should have stuck together, warm tongue, ice pole. This thought bubble escapes and ensnares in the red-blue cloth draped on lab above the decks. Your neighbour across the road kick-drummed into gear. She stands out front and frowns up into the studio window. Exhale, a nicotine cloud big enough to devour her. All that's left, grimace, blonde bob. Another face appears, an angel or an omen, either or, backflips down prober. The tar glistens like soap on a slab. What is left is breached. Construction houses, Hessian-cladded hideouts, chainsaws as beacons, how long, employable greetings, press 5 for everything else. You quietly flip a record like the earth that turns from day to night. Some ways of dying happen the least on vacant streets. Here inside, we've got drum and bass to salve the heart, break, salvage me. Adrift in this year's timelessness, once sparked stars like letters and soup, dull chrome, space junk, slow revolve. Yet the great Campbell's soup has cast me out. I float and I float and I hurl myself at the end of this line. Break, lust after, more breaks, please, a little more outside, hand touch, break fast. Amen to the righteous angel now returning, a turquoise savior, peddling the divine connection, the golden orb, Da Vinci's coda. Everything, for now at least, a la Norma. Thank you. And just before I finish up, I just want to say a big shout out to Root and Curtis listening from Melbourne. And I love you so much. And I see you and I can't wait to see you in person. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Holly, for your trademark lyricism and imagery. It was amazing as always. The last artist on our bill tonight is Vidya Rajan. Vidya is a multi-talented playwright, screenwriter, and comedian. She has recently worked with ABC Comedy, the Emerging Writers Festival, Blue Room Theatre, Melbourne Festival, and Griffin Theatre. And she's a current writer in residence at Melbourne's Malthouse Theatre, making new work. And she's coming in hot with a new work recorded for National Young Writers Festival.
In the criminal justice.
Good evening, people, cyborgs, tardigrades, elected local Martian representatives 1 and 2, and of course, gentle incels of the jury. My name is Vidya Rajan, and I sit here before you today on this small matter, this alleged crime, this honestly nonsense suit from the prosecution, whose arguments I'm not even going to bother to address. I sit here before you as the defense attorney of one Elon Musk of Tesla Inc. And, you know, this is a small case, but it's actually one of the biggest issues of our time, because what affects Elon Musk affects all of us here on Mars. not just because Tesla Inc. owns 75% of the planet, but because this case here today is about what it means to be alive. And that's important to all of us. I know you cyborgs care a lot about eternal life. Now, before I begin, I am obligated to tell you that I swore an oath to justice. Justice, of course, being the name of the large multi-planetary multinational law firm where I work. And I am also obligated to tell you that Justice TM is a trademark of Justice TM, the firm. And therefore, if anybody is tempted to use the word justice in the old dictionary sense of the term that was scrubbed from the dictionaries in 2100, that is 100 in Mars years, we will be forced to sue. So just a little warning, please do not use it in that term. Thanks from Justice TM. Now, one of the values of Justice TM, the firm, is honesty. Honesty. And the meaning of which, again, I am unfortunately obligated to tell you, is being arbitrated in one of the larger courts back down on Earth. So that meaning is currently not completely decided. But I say, to hell with it. We are common folk here, right? We know what honesty means. We all know that honesty means to speak with emphasis and like it seems we care. And so I promise you today, I will be speaking to you with the utmost honesty about my client, Elon Musk. And also you will get to vote at the end of this about this decision. So incels, do not worry. I have no active choice here. It's all up to you at the end of this. So let's get started. Elon Musk today, accused here. Who is he? That is the crux of the matter. Now, Elon Musk has been called many things, a great man, a good man. Admittedly, a lot of those things were by himself. But also, on Mars, there is a confusion, and I see it in faces every day. Elon Musk, a man? No, isn't Elon Musk a car? Yes, I know. A lot of you think that Elon Musk is a car. And I'm here to tell you, no, he is many things. He's a visionary, but he's not a vehicle. He's a disruptor, not something to be driven around in. He is an entity, not something that honks. Elon Musk is not a car, and that is the crux of the issue here today. And I understand why you have this confusion. You see that silver Tesla being driven around Mars, driving itself around Mars rather, and you hear people calling it Elon Musk. Oh, there's Elon Musk. There he goes. He's a car, is what it looks like. But that's only because we do not know history, which is an indictment on the Martian school system. And do not blame yourselves for that. Also, side note, Elon has told me that he has a plan to fix the school system. He's going to reshape the knowledge acquisition paradigm we have here. He's got a great algorithm for it, it's just nearly ready. But sorry, I got excited about that. I'm digressing. No, it's because we do not know our history. If we knew our history, we would know that in the year 2058, Elon Musk was actually organic matter who transitioned from his flesh prison and transferred his consciousness, or as he phrased it, his most alpha and Chad neurons, into the framework of a silver Tesla, the very same silver Tesla that you see on the streets of Mars today. So, looks like a car, but is actually an immortal being in a car. Yes, Elon Musk did achieve immortality in 2058, and we don't hear about it more because it was the first and also the last due to several conditions he placed upon the transfer. Sorry, cyborgs, but it happened. Doesn't stop it from happening. Now, there's lots of historical proof about this, and I'm going to go through that very quickly. Proof one, how did Elon disrupt death himself? How do we know it worked? How do we know he's an entity in that car? Because when they turned on the car, what did it try to do? And all this is available, if you looked it up. What did it try to do? He drove straight to Burning Man. The car tried to drive straight to Burning Man. They stopped it, of course. And then when they tested the car, when the scientists tested the car, proof two, when they tested the car and said things like Thai cave or mini submarine, what did the car try to do? It tried to run them over. In 2 cases, it succeeded. 2 scientists did die. So proof two, That car, would a car react like that? No, that was clearly Elon Musk. Proof 3, when they connected the car to Twitter, which, fun historical fact, is the only social media platform that survived the colonization of Mars, when they connected the car to Twitter, what did it tweet? It tweeted, and I quote, "Hi, grime, sad face." And then they thought it was best to disconnect the car from Twitter. But if that doesn't prove it's Elon Musk, what does? Okay, so I'm looking at your faces and okay, I'm seeing the skepticism. You're like, okay, we don't know what happened in history. We're Martians. This isn't art. This isn't art. This is Earth history. And I get it. Look, I'm a Marsh. I look like I'm in this fancy suit, but I am a Martian kid, just like the rest of you. Right? I grew up on the streets. I don't want to act like I'm some big fancy space lawyer coming down here to talk to you. All right. I grew up like you. I just wanted to make some cryptocurrency to bank home for my family. I took this job, right? When I took I thought I was joining the UN peacekeeping, the last peacekeeping effort. But by the time I graduated, the UN was acquired by Justice TM, and that's how I ended up here. I tried to do pro bono work. I signed up for the fun run. I wanted to raise money for the SEAL Cubs, but then they told us that the SEAL Cubs was actually the name of the dad rock band of our CEO that plays on weekends, and it was actually named after the last SEAL Cub that his family ended up killing on their fracking estate. So something that apparently was not common knowledge. So RIP SEAL Cubs and RIP SEALs, because SEALs are just adult SEAL Cubs, really. Anyway, I'm just saying that because I know it's very hard to accept this historical argument, but I'm like all of you, and I have been frankly irritated by that car, not in the past, but in the present, right? We see that car driving around, and just think of the things that car has done to our planet in the last, 30 years. Remember the time the car yelled at us that it was going to disrupt the entertainment paradigm of Mars by creating the perfect pop star, and then it manufactured Beyonce, which just caused Earth Beyonce to disappear because of the space-time wormhole, and then the Beyonce in front of our eyes also disintegrated, and then she was erased from music history, and then the next time we tried to listen to music, all that was on was yodel pop because the course of history was changed, and who can forget that? Would a car do that? Could a car do that? No, that is clearly the work of a fucked entity, an entity called Elon Musk. Think of the other things that car has done over the last 30 years. Could a car have started that minor civil conflict on the other side of the planet when somebody there said that aquaponics already existed on Earth? Stop trying to make them happen, Elon. No, a car couldn't have done that. Could a car have somehow avoided tax on 2 continents and yet gotten richer? No, a car couldn't have done that. That's an entity in a car that is Elon Musk. And could a car have received the UN Humanitarian Award for inaction on the environment sponsored by Justice TM? Inaction, of course, being defined as the most radical form of action and peace. No, a car couldn't do that. That is the work of a feckless zillionaire who is Elon Musk, an entity trapped in a car. I may not like this car any more than you do, but that does not change the fact that it is not actually a car, as evidenced by even these present actions, let alone history. So I ask you today to vote for Elon Musk not being a car, and to vote on the charge, which is that of a parking ticket outside of Taco Bell. Only cars can get parking tickets. That wasn't a car outside Taco Bell. That was Elon Musk wearing a car, really. So, not a car. And please, even if you don't like it, we have to stand for something. So I'm going to ask you all to vote now, as is custom, by a range of emotions. As you see next to you, you can choose a sad react or an angry react, or you can choose a love react or a like react. So your reacts will tell us which way you vote. The good ones for Elon Musk is not a car, and the bad ones for Elon Musk is a car. I will wait. Great, there are some votes coming in. Yes, great. We do not. Yeah, the judge says, as as the piece of legislation was passed last week, that any engagement with an argument is taken as evidence of yes for Justice TM. You have voted yes. I don't really need to know what the reaction was. Thank you. Thank you for voting yes, for engaging. We love your engagement at Justice TM. Thank you for your service. Okay, great. I'm going to go now. Crashed.
Thank you, Vidya, for that haunting, almost definitely accurate, and hopefully not unavoidable vision of the future in which we'll never get rid of Elon Musk and his extremely Chad and alpha neurons. Now, festivals, of course, don't just happen, and there's a lot of people that we need to thank in this process. The National Young Writers Festival is supported by the Australia Council for the Arts, the copyright agency Cultural Fund, and Create New South Wales. And current presenting partners are Hachette, ABC Haywire, Express Media, VoiceWorks, Carclu, Country Arts SA, Gay V Club, Stand Up for Poetry, Newcastle, Maitland, Port Stephens, and Lake Macquarie Libraries, Sweaty City, The Joy Offensive, and Word Travels and the Australian Poetry Slam.
On behalf of the co-directors, I would like to thank our really phenomenal co-managers, Jessie Oliver and Saoirse Nash, and our excellent, amazing communications manager, Emma Rose Smith. Thank you all so much.
Raelee?
Raelee's on mute.
Technology. And I would like to thank our board as well. Mark, Thomas, Karina Bates, Joanna Davison, Hiwa Ramsey, Grace Ace Heifetz, Gemma Birrell, Catherine Sullivan, Rachel Toop, Alexandra Neil, and Marika Webb-Pullman.
We'd also like to extend a huge thanks to Kat and David at Colour Code, who are our web team, who have recently redone our website. It's now incredibly flash. And if you wanted to have a look at our website and see how flash it was, you'd also see our full 2020 program, which is all up there right now. You see all the events, all the artists that are on them. It'll give you instructions on the events as to how you can register. We strongly encourage you all to go and have a look. And now, I believe we have come to the end of our proceedings tonight. So thank you very much for coming and watching. A big thank you from myself and Isobel and Raelee. And again, if we could just extend a huge thanks to Jessie, Oliver, Saoirse Nash, and Emma Rose Smith from the team for making this wonderful event happen. Emma has been working tirelessly on it for weeks. We're very grateful, and we are very much looking forward to seeing all of you at our festival this year. 1st to the 4th of October. Be there.
Thank you.